All right, so get ready, because today we are diving deep into the story of a character who's so much more than meets the eye. We're talking about Galadriel, and let me tell you, thanks to the amazing source material you all sent in, we're going way beyond her portrayal in Lord of the Rings.
Way beyond.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone thinks they know her, right?
Right.
The powerful, serene Lady of Lothlorien. But her story is, well, it's a wild ride. It's more complex, more fascinating, more ancient than you probably realize.
That's because Galadriel's story, it's not just some chapter in a history book, it spans ages. Literally, we're talking about an elf who witnessed events that shaped the very fabric of Middle-earth. That kind of perspective, that longevity, we can barely comprehend it.
Okay, so let's break it down then. One of these sources dives right into her family tree, and let me tell you, Galadriel's got some heavy hitters in her lineage.
Oh yeah, we're talking High Kings of the Elves here. That's an impressive family reunion.
For sure.
And get this, one source mentioned her hair.
Her hair, yes.
It shimmered with the light of the two trees of Valinor. Now, for anyone who needs a refresher, these trees were basically the sun and moon before, the sun and moon.
Right.
This magical light radiating from them gave life to everything. And Galadriel's hair had that same light.
And that detail right there, that's crucial. It connects her physically to the most potent forces of creation, of beauty in Tolkien's world. This isn't just about, oh, she's got pretty hair. No, this speaks to her very essence. And the two trees, that connection makes her unique, even among elves, which is saying something. And then there's Fëanor. This is where it gets juicy. Fëanor, creator of the Silmarils. Those gems that caused so much chaos, they were inspired by Galadriel's hair.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like foreshadowing, right?
Yeah.
All the epic drama, the ambition that unfolds in the first age.
I never made that connection. That's amazing. And speaking of ambition, one source mentioned Galadriel's early desire for independence, like she wanted a realm of her own to rule, which we don't really see in Lord of the Rings. By that point, it's all wisdom and serenity. So what changed?
Well, that's what makes her early history so fascinating. This wasn't just about grabbing power, it was about autonomy. And remember, this is at a time when the elves were facing some really big dilemmas, like, do we stay in Valinor, our paradise, or do we leave for Middle-earth? Choosing to leave, that was a bold move, driven by Galadriel's desire to forge her own path. And keep in mind, she could have gone back to Valinor later on, but she chose to stay in Middle-earth. So it makes you wonder if this desire to find a place to rule, to create something lasting, if that was always part of her motivation.
That is such a good point. Okay, but before we get too far into that, we have to address the elephant, maybe the Balrog in the room.
Uh-oh.
The kinslaying. One source mentions that Galadriel actually fought in it. This wasn't some passive event for her. She was there. So, expert, can you unpack this whole thing? Because fighting elves is, intense.
Intense is an understatement. Imagine this, right?
Mm-hmm.
The very first children of the creator god, the elves, they turn on each other. Brutal, bloody conflict. That's the kinslaying in a nutshell. And it left an indelible mark on the entire elven race. Galadriel included, obviously. Consequences. Huge. Physically and spiritually, it's one of those events that stays with you,
Yeah.
Shapes your entire worldview.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So just to recap, we've got powerful lineage, physically and metaphorically radiating light, a thirst for independence, and then boom, kinslaying. That's quite the resume before we even get to Lothlorien.
Oh yeah, and that journey, from the fires of rebellion to the haven of Lothlorien, it's filled with just as much intrigue. We're talking encounters with beings of immense power, losses that would break anyone, choices that determine the fate of Middle-earth. It's a lot.
It is a lot. Speaking of encounters with powerful beings, one source mentioned Galadriel spending time with Melian the Maya.
Melian.
This is huge. We're talking Sauron-level power here. They were friends.
Do you imagine?
What kind of impact did that have on Galadriel, having a friend, a mentor like that?
I mean, the relationship between those two, it's fascinating. Melian and Galadriel, both of them end up as powerful rulers, right?
Yeah.
Establishing hidden kingdoms in Middle-earth. Talk about a power couple. It's safe to say that Galadriel, she's always been thirsty for knowledge, for leadership, so she must have learned a lot from Melian.
It's like having the wisest, most powerful being in Middle-earth as your mentor. And speaking of names, one thing I noticed going through these sources is that Galadriel seems to have a few different ones.
Yeah.
What's the deal with that? It's pretty unusual, even for elves.
You're right. Names are a big deal in Tolkien. Especially for elves. It's not just a label. It reflects your lineage, your deeds, your essence, everything. So when an elf's name changes, it usually means something big has happened. And Galadriel, she's got a few names floating around in these sources, which tells you something about her story. It's deep, it's
Yeah.
complex, like each name is a different chapter.
That's a really cool way to think about it. But even with all those different names, it's Galadriel that seems to stick.
Right.
Is there a story behind that?
Oh, Galadriel. That name was a gift from Celeborn, her future husband. And here's the kicker. He gave her that name before they left Valinor.
Oh, wow.
Right. It speaks to their bond forged in their homeland.
That is incredibly romantic, especially given everything they went through. We're talking the loss of her brother Finrod, the destruction of Beleriand. Those are some heavy burdens to carry.
And carry them she did. It's easy to talk about resilience, but those losses, those heartbreaks, they changed her. No doubt about it. They deepened her compassion, fueled her wisdom, probably why she had that air of serenity about her later on. That peacefulness, it wasn't just some elven trait, it was hard-won, born from ages of experience and honestly, a whole lot of pain.
It really makes you realize her strength wasn't just about magic or power. It was about endurance, about facing loss and coming out the other side wiser, even more determined.
Exactly. It's the kind of strength that's forged in fire.
Yeah.
And that's what makes her such a compelling figure, not just in Tolkien's world, but anywhere. In any story about resilience, about hope.
Oh, okay, so we've talked about her journey, but let's be real for a second. Galadriel's power. That's what everyone wants to talk
I
about.
think cool, she's a powerhouse.
One source even called her like the most powerful elf in Middle-earth. I mean, we're talking telepathy, foresight. It's like she's on another level.
And that's what makes her so fascinating. Her power isn't just one thing, right? It's everything. It's her lineage, her experiences. Oh, yeah, let's not forget that ring.
Oh yeah, Nenya. That ring of power that even Gandalf was like, whoa, careful with that. It makes you wonder, though, with that kind of power, what could she have done? I mean, especially when everything was so bleak.
It's the question, isn't it? It's what makes her story more than just good versus evil. Remember when Frodo offered her the One Ring in Lothlorien?
Oh, man.
The temptation to just take that power, to become, well, almost godlike, to shape Middle-earth. That was a huge moment for her.
Every time I read that passage, fair is the sea and the sun, she says, but dreadful is the storm and the lightning. Chills, literal chills.
I feel
You
it.
get a glimpse of that alternate reality, you know, where she takes the ring.
It's both exhilarating and terrifying.
Totally.
She could have gone that way, easily. Think about it, all those centuries, fighting against Sauron, the pressure. But that's what makes her choice so powerful. She recognized that pull, that seductive nature of power, the danger in thinking you can control it.
It takes serious strength to resist that, to choose, restraint over domination. That's a level of wisdom and selflessness you don't see very often, especially in stories about power.
It gets to the heart of her character, you know. She understood that true strength wasn't about wielding power, but about knowing when to hold back, when to protect, not control.
So true. Now, I did want to circle back to something we mentioned earlier about her leaving Valinor. One source said she didn't actually participate in the rebellion. She chose to go to Middle-earth on her own. Does that change things? Knowing she wasn't part of that initial, act of defiance.
It adds another layer to it, right? Because while it's true that the Valar, basically the angelic beings in Tolkien's world, might have let her go eventually, leaving when she did, meant she was still subject to the doom of Mandos, which was this curse placed on the Noldor, her people, for the rebellion.
So even though her reasons were different, same consequences. Seems a little harsh even for the Valar. What did this doom even mean? Like for those of us who need a refresher course on ancient elven curses.
It's not so much a curse, but a prophecy of sorrow. It meant their power would fade over time, their lifespans tied to Middle-earth. No going back to Valinor or to Paradise. Imagine that, being exiled from your homeland, knowing every step forward is a step into danger. That was Galadriel's reality.
Wow. Yeah, that puts things in perspective. Sounds like even with the best intentions, there were still consequences. But knowing Galadriel, she wouldn't have let that stop her. Her whole story is about overcoming adversity.
100%. And that's something we can all relate to, right? Even if our problems aren't on the same scale as fighting Sauron. The idea that even when things are tough, when we're carrying the weight of past mistakes, we can still grow, still be resilient. That's a powerful message.
It really is. It makes everything she accomplished later, like Lothlorien, even more impressive. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we jump into her reign, there's one more thing about her early life I found really interesting. So we've talked about Galadriel's incredible journey, the highs, the lows, the magic, the heartbreak. But there's this one moment, one little detail from the sources that really stuck with me.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Which moment?
Okay, so picture it. The Fellowship is in Lothlorien.
Magical.
All right. And Galadriel, she's giving each of them a gift, right?
Yeah, I love that part.
Well, one source mentioned Gimli,
Uh-huh.
Gimli the dwarf, and his gift.
Oh, Gimli. What'd he get? Some kind of battle axe.
You'd think, right? I mean, he's a dwarf warrior. But no, he asks for something way more profound.
Yeah.
He asks for a memory.
A memory.
Yeah. He asks Galadriel if he can just keep the memory of her with him.
Wow. That's really something.
Right. It's such a simple request, but it really gets to you. And it seemed to really move Galadriel, too, which I thought was interesting. Why do you think that is? What's so powerful about this request, especially coming from Gimli?
I think it speaks to Galadriel's ability to connect with people.
Yeah.
Even people who are, well, different from her. I mean, let's be real. Elf and dwarf relations weren't exactly peachy at this point in Middle-earth.
Understatement of the century. Centuries of, shall we say, disagreements.
Exactly. But here's Gimli, this rough and tumble dwarf, and he's expressing such heartfelt admiration for her. And Galadriel, she sees that sincerity, the honor he's giving her. It's a good reminder that even with all the, preconceived notions we might have, genuine connection is still possible.
It's like this little flicker of hope.
Yeah.
And it's coming from Galadriel. This is someone who's seen it all, right? Millennia of conflict, of people judging each other based on, well, whatever. It just hits different coming from her, you know?
Absolutely. She's not letting those old grudges define how she sees Gimli. It shows her wisdom, her ability to see the best in people. And honestly, we could all use a little more of that in the world, don't you think?
That's the truth. Well, as much as I'd love to keep geeking out about Galadriel all day long, we are reaching the end of our deep dive.
Already.
I know, right? Time flies when you're exploring the legend of Galadriel. So for all our listeners out there, what's the one thing you really hope they take away from all of this?
I think it comes down to this. Imagine living for thousands of years. You see empires rise and fall. You watch your own people fade. You're constantly battling against darkness. What does a being like Galadriel, what do they hold on to? What do they value? I think her story gives us a glimpse of that answer. It reminds us that hope never dies, that even when faced with the impossible, we still have choices. And maybe, just maybe, true strength isn't about power or domination, but about resilience, about compassion, about choosing the light, even in the darkest of times.
Powerful words. Thanks to you, everyone listening has a much deeper understanding of who Galadriel really is. It's been a journey. And a huge thank you to all of you for sending in your source material. Seriously, you all are the best. We hope this deep dive has inspired you to learn even more, to keep asking questions, and to never stop exploring the hidden depths of Tolkien's world and beyond. Until next time, happy reading.